is Mara Louise Dahlman. I'm a hardcore Anglican, bibliophile, and young writer. And this is my new YouTube channel where I'll be sharing video essays on my favorite books and discussing them. And today we are discussing the Iliad by Homer. I read the Iliad last year, and as a Christian, something that immediately struck me was how immoral acts were just considered normal in ancient Greek society, and how that really played out in the character of Achilles. Of course, ancient Greek society is extremely abnormal to us today, but we can still find something that kind of clicks in us when we read the story. We can still find something that makes us think deeper about it, and that is what we want to discuss today. What is it that makes us think deeper? Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Achilles is arguably the character at the center of the story. He is like the guy in the story. And I think that is in part... Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar, Achilles is arguably the character at the center of the story. The story starts and ends with his deeds and actions. He is the guy, you could say. And I think that is in part due to his parents. Achilles was born to leaders in society. His father Peleus was a king and his mother Thetis was a goddess. Therefore, they made Achilles fit for a leadership role in society, even a warrior. Both of these things are said in the epic, quote, "For my mother Thetis the goddess tells me I carry two swords of glory," end quote. Book 9, line 410 to 416. Achilles' parents trained Achilles too, quote, "And Peleus the aged was telling his own son, Achilles, to always be best in battle and preeminent beyond all others," end quote. Book 11, line 782. So they knew Achilles had potential, it is safe to say, and they wanted him to be the warrior that he would become. So why, if these things are said in the text, do I think that is not the point of Achilles? Well, I think that Homer had a specific telos or purpose for Achilles that you can often miss if you just read the Iliad as a story instead of as a message to us about truth. I don't think that his telos for Achilles was to show us that he was just a great warrior. Like, there's so much more going on with Achilles in the story, and he doesn't come across as a very likable character either. Like, he's not Harry Potter or Spider-Man, where they're like heroes, but also have a good endearing personality, and you love them for that. Achilles is not like that. He's a tough kind of brute, I guess you could say. He's not like the great guy who's just saving the world as he makes sarcastic jokes. And I think that without question, Achilles is shown to be a different sort of hero. It is shown that he is fierce in battle, of course. He has a great advantage in fighting because he is half immortal. As shown right here in the text, quote, "There are difficult horses for mortal men to manage, or even to ride them for all except Achilles, who is born of an immortal mother," end quote. Book 9, line 485. And here it is shown that Achilles lets nothing get in his way when he is in battle. Quote, "Meanwhile, Achilles was destroying the Trojans themselves and their single-foot horses," end quote. Book 21, line 520. Achilles is quite obviously the greatest warrior of the Achaeans, and no one is more feared than him. And I would like to mention that the other characters constantly describe Achilles as godlike. It is almost like the definition of him as a person. They revere him and would do his will at any given moment. We have these kinds of people today. Say if Taylor Swift said to her fans to wear red on April 7th, people would do so. You would see it all over social media. And that, I think, is what, like, the kind of power Achilles has, where they have put him on a pedestal where he is somehow, like, greater than them. And I don't think that that is necessarily good for him to have. But because this power is not good for him to have, because as I got further into the epic, I became more and more wary of Achilles as a person. Like, it was kind of like whenever Achilles was mentioned in the text, you'd be like, uh-oh, what's happening now, kind of thing. Achilles makes brash and even selfish decisions, with his lust overcoming his senses. When he refuses to fight because Agamemnon returned his mistress to her father at the beginning of the epic, He says immediately to Agamemnon, quote, "You forget all this or else you care nothing. And now my prize you threaten to strip away from me in person." End quote. Book 1, line 160. But later in the epic, Homer tells us that he bemoans his situation that he himself created. Quote, "Achilles remained by the black ships raging." End quote. Achilles misses fighting, but he will not go back because he is prideful. And his own pride is more important to him than his warriors. Achilles' selfishness is further shown when he sacrifices his warriors' lives instead of surrendering to the Trojans and going back to his wife in Greece. And I think it is at the end of book 4 or book 3, I can't remember right now, but it's after like the first big battle in the epic. And Hector, it is described that Hector goes back to his wife and children to see if they're okay after the battle. And meanwhile, Achilles is like, "No, I'm not gonna like stop this war. I'm not gonna surrender because I still want more bloodshed." And Hector is like, "Are you guys okay?" to his wife and children. And I think that is such a contrast and shows the difference between the two different leaders of the armies. Like Hector on one side is caring about his family and wanting to end the war, and Achilles is like, "No dude, I want more bloodshed." And the other characters, like his, I guess you could say friends or fellow warriors would be a more accurate term, like see this of Achilles, because Patroclus, quote, says, "But you, Achilles, who can do anything with you? May no such anger take me as this you cherish." Book 16, line 29. Patroclus is saying that Achilles cherishes anger and that he prefers it, almost. We see this earlier in the chapter 2 when Achilles mocks Patroclus, who is crying over the warriors' deaths. And Achilles says, quote, "Why then are you crying like some poor little girl, Patroclus?" End quote. Book 16, line 3. Achilles does not comfort his fellow warrior, instead mocks him. Achilles only shows sadness when Patroclus himself dies. Achilles laments his death, and then immediately his sadness turns to anger. When he decides to go back into battle, it is not because he wants to protect his people, but to get vengeance on Hector. I think this tells us something about people in power too. Overall, I mean. They don't always make decisions based on our best interests. However, like even if we think that, a politician can say things and, he can say one thing but do another because the latter is more profitable to him. Like just because someone is famous and says something doesn't mean that he'll do it. And we shouldn't put people, politicians, celebrities, any of those powerful people who influence us on a pedestal as if they are some sort of mega human who is better than us or, is a perfect person. That doesn't happen. That's not real life. And sometimes those powerful people only take action when they themselves have something to gain. This is illustrated perfectly in the character of Achilles, because as I said, he only goes back into battle when he wants to get something out of it. He wants to kill Hector. That's why he goes back into battle. Compared to that of typical heroes, the moral compass of Achilles is shockingly different. And I don't know if I've said this, but Achilles is constantly sleeping with people. That is the culture in ancient Greece, I know, but it's oh my gosh, this is a lot, he is constantly doing that. And it is said, that he has a wife back in Greece, but he is just, out here fighting and sleeping with people. That's very, very different to other heroes that we have in stories. The only character that's coming to mind right now is Harry Potter, but, Robin Hood. He doesn't, he's not immoral in his acts. He's not this, lustful guy or, he just wants more money. He is giving back to the poor in the story. He's a good guy and moral. He's doing that while he's a good hero. Like, he's still a great warrior and a fighter, but he is also like a moral good guy who doesn't want to care for himself but for others. And I think that is something that is in stark contrast to Achilles. We are all humans and have flaws, but Achilles' flaws are different because he does not realize that his decisions affect and even harm the lives of people around him. Instead, he makes hot-headed decisions based on himself. Achilles' role in the story is not to show us how powerful he is. Rather, Homer warns us through Achilles that we should not put powerful people on a pedestal, and even that we should be wary of them.